Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai in 1954. Here is the Blu-ray Steelbook, and yes, we're here of course with another Kurosawa review. This time, let's face it, the most popular Kurosawa film overall, and of course it's a rewatch tonight, and basically my third viewing. So yeah, I've not seen it many times. I first saw this in 2014, it was after Yojimbo. That was my first Kurosawa film. I thought, it's kind of, I was told it was kind of an easy entry point, and I think, it wasn't a masterpiece for me on first watch. I watched this and I just thought, wow, that actually blew me away, and of course, then I thought, Kurosawa is definitely going to be on my favourite directors list, and it's just, I've seen, of course, quite a few Kurosawas after that, and of course, yes, they've all Stray Dog was the only one that wasn't, stunning. Hidden Fortress, Akira, Rashomon, masterpieces. This film, of course, very high on the Sight and Sound poll, AFI. IMDb, of course, all these lists, and just, it is one of the most loved films of all time, full stop. You could say it's the most famous Japanese film, along with Spirited Away at times, and stuff, and yeah. And Tokyo Story, maybe not Tokyo Story, actually, Ozu doesn't get enough attention really. I don't think any of his films really are some of the very most known, you could say, top three or anything, but Kurosawa films, widely popular and known by many. This film, has been, of course, remade quite a few times and basically, copied as well, indirectly. And yes, Magnificent Seven, of course, very, kind of near to this, and 54 was, a great year for Japanese cinema. I've heard, of course, Sancho the Bailiff is meant to be a great film, same year. And of course, in general, On the Waterfront, Rear Window, which for me is very close to this film, and yes. For me, I think it's not just because it's so popular, but for me, this is the best Kurosawa film that I've seen, and I will announce, I really, 99.9% do say that it's not going to change. This will always probably be my favourite Kurosawa film. I just don't imagine the balance of characters, adventure, and just emotion to really exceed this in his filmography. And yes, this film, I do prefer Ozu overall as a director, and probably Miyazaki as well, probably. But yes, this is the Kurosawa film, the only one that really gets close to kind of the very best of them two directors. I think Miyazaki has made my favorite Japanese film of all time, and of course Ozu made Tokyo Story, which is his best for me, and this this and Tokyo Story, Seven Samurai, very close. I will tell you a couple of spots really on my favorite films list, and they will get the same rating. So whatever I give this, really will be given to Tokyo Story on that rewatch, of course this year. And yes, this film for me, when I first saw it, I was entranced. I was so compelled by this. It drew me in. Again, kind of dreamlike qualities. The way it's shot, the way it's edited, and just the overall kind of atmosphere to this. Really, it's kind of very dreamlike again. Not as much as Rashomon, and it's not kind of as fable-like or fantastical in that sense. But it really is. It's something it's so full of atmosphere and kind of this aura. It's kind of like a mythic film once again. Of course, it's set in feudal Japan, 1500s, I believe, and of course, for me, this is really just such an interesting period in Japan, and it makes for great cinema. It really does. This film, it just what this does, and of course, it's being told to be, a perfect film, and I completely agree with that. What it does is just everything perfectly of how to make an epic film. Of course, epics for me, of course, some people don't like long films as much. For me, it's the opposite. I think potentially I do think actually epic films I like more, a lot more. A lot of my favourite films are epics. It's just a way that if someone can make a perfect epic, it's hard to kind of top. You feels more like a journey. You get more invested potentially in the characters, and it's something where you can more potential for for character development and of course world building, and just as I said, it's an adventure film, it's an action film, and in that sense, it really needs to be an epic in this sense, and this is, as well. A film is never too long if it's as compelling as this. I think really simple matter of fact is if I'm compelled to a level by a film, I don't really care when it ends. Kind of thing. I can watch a film for for so long, it doesn't matter. I can keep going. And actually, it's another film like this where some consider it a long film, but I could watch more of this. I would like to see an extended cut. It's that good. And yes, I think this film, it just means so much to me. It's a basic story, very, very simple plot, and that makes potentially for the best films. I think a lot of the best films are simple plots. It's just how they're executed. This one, of course, perfectly executed, and it's my opinion. Again, it's not saying this just because it's popular. I do genuinely believe this is a perfect film, and just these characters. It's basic plot of this village. It's basically planned by these bandits to be taken over, raided, and yes, basically someone overhears within the kind of village of this, and then they report back. The villagers kind of decide what to do with this, and very, very quickly they decide to hire some samurai in order to defend the village for their protection. But of course they can't pay them money, really, so it's kind of in exchange for food. So the samurai know there's not going to be any money, no actual payments, but of course, they do it for honour, and they do it, of course, for food as well. Of course, yes, and the rest of the film, after the hour mark, once they all band together, they form the group of the Seven Samurai, of course. Basically, it's the rest of the film is planning the defence and the actual defence and showdown for this village. And of course, there's many, many subplots along the way. Of course, the youngest of the samurai has kind of a romance in the film, and has a kind of a coming of age story. It really is just wonderful. When I first saw this, I was just I related to it so much, and I was kind of just in awe of this. I just loved, in particular, this arc, and of course, Toshirô Mifune once again dances on the screen, and of course gives one of the most legendary performances of all time. For me, he does wonderful stuff here, of course. Takashi Shimura, is probably the best in the film. I think he's actually better than he is in Akira. Hands down, I don't, that's my opinion. I think he's a lot better than he was in that, and just gives a even more endearing and commanding performance. The character, of Kanbi is basically the leader of the samurai, and he's the one who kind of originally forms this kind of group and recruits them in many ways, and it's just Daisuke Kato as well as in the film, who's kind of he's not great in some stuff that I've seen, but other times when he's a hit, basically he really is. I loved him in this film. Brought a lot of the warmth to it, and that's the thing. This film is so warm, it's so kind of heartfelt, and just charming. It really is, and of course the whole kind of warmth of the samurai group, and of course the community as well. Although of course it's meant to be kind of how they're kind of outsiders, even though they help them. But yes, there's such a warmth throughout the film, and of course the way this film is shot is another level, really. This is better than Rashomon even, which is some feat. I think Rashomon is legendary cinematography. Of course, all the Kurosawa films that I've seen are wonderfully shot, even Stray Dog in many regards. Cinematography, of course, is really something else. The editing was an issue I had with that film, but yes, the rest of the Kurosawa films have been perfectly edited, really, and shot. This film for me is magnum opus in the visuals, and in every regard. I think the characters, the adventure spirit this film has, even though it really takes place, it doesn't really cover. Basically, there's not a lot of scenes where it is kind of typical adventure. You see there a lot of ground covered, like for example, Fellowship of the Ring. Of course, they are mostly travelling in that film, but in this, they do travel for a bit, but it's mainly a couple of locations, including of course the village. But it still feels like this massive epic, in scope, and it feels like they've come so far, and it's just because it's genius storytelling. The characters are so masterfully written, they're so perfectly acted, and of course, just everything in this film is just so compelling. The little details, the kind of little parts where they're mapping out the kind of the routes that the samurai, the bandits could get in. And then of course they're planning out their action of defence. They're fortifying this village, and just the very, very subtle and quiet scenes in the centre of the film. One of the reasons why it's at times, there's parts where some of my favourite parts is just when it's so kind of peaceful and at ease, but they're kind of just pointing to the map and just walking around the village, and even that is just so perfect. It really is. This film, it's kind of simplicity in cinema perfected, like most of the best films for me. I think it's about how simple, you can kind of, if you perfect simplicity basically, and get get across characters, and of course, just a wonderful script. You can't really go wrong. And this film, it's got humour as well. Toshirô Mifune brings the humour to the film more than anyone, and he's just so good in this film. He's kind of the outsider of the group, and of course, as the film goes on, they accept him more, and it's just this is such a masterpiece. I think I was moved so much by this. Of course, the final act of the film is basically many stages of this massive battle. It's not really, you couldn't really say this is just a couple of battles. It's like a whole battle. The final act. It's probably about an hour of just kind of off and on. Scenes where they are battling. The bandits, and basically it's so perfect in the way it's done. The flow of it is never interrupted. You've got perfect character development within that as well when they're not fighting, and it's just every single moment of action in this is so kinetic, it's so visceral. Of course, Kurosawa once again using different lenses, and of course zooms to kind of zoomed in shots where basically you feel, it's hard to describe it, basically because he's using particular techniques, it feels like it's very easy and quick for someone to kind of go across the entire frame, and of course that adds to the more energetic feel the film has. It feels more kinetic, more alive, and it's just, there is constantly something going on within the frame here, and it's so wonderful. It really is something to study and just be in awe of this, even just the simple, again, Toshirô Mifune running down the hill, like he's done in Rashomon, very similar there, and it's just, it feels so alive, it feels so kinetic, and it's just genius here. There is also, of course, so much patience within the film. It's not just a film that is all out energetic, it's got so much patience. Kurosawa is always in charge of the tone of the film, and of course the actors as well. Takashi Shimura never breaks character. He is so perfect in this film. My second favourite probably Japanese actor after Toshirô, of course the Ozu regular, really, and basically yes, Toshirô Mifune is probably my third favourite Japanese actor, and they're all just so perfect. Takashi Shimura and Toshirô Mifune, both really the best characters, and of course you've got the young samurai who's a close contender. His arc is so compelling, it's so kind of pure and innocent. This is what it portrays within this character, the young samurai. It kind of portrays the innocence of youth, and of course the actual transition to being an adult in many regards. It's a coming of age story with him, and of course he forms a romance, and it's just very deep as well with her father. She doesn't respect the fact basically a farmer can go with a samurai, and there's all this going on throughout the film, all these different subplots that are perfectly balanced and never break kind of the overall narrative. And of course there's many themes in this, economic and social issues that are raised, and it's so wonderfully explored. There is never a single moment where you feel like it's not balanced perfectly, and it's just constantly compelling. As I say, the script is razor sharp. The characters are so well defined. Instantly, we are straight away, feeling that these are completely 3D characters. They have characters who are completely fleshed out. They are, they're flawed characters, but again, they're so likable, charming. The warmth, of course, is always present in the film, and of course, there is a very dark, kind of bittersweet ending. But again, it's something that once you've seen it, for me, I was completely moved and uplifted in many regards, and just this overall journey, it's just such a kind of, you kind of feel so wonderful after seeing the film, even though it is very tragic at times. It's not a depressing film at all, and it's not something that's completely sad in the way that Akira is. This is, of course, some of the samurai die, some of them don't, and it's just kind of this tragic but kind of bittersweet ending, where of course not all of them die and stuff, but things they don't end up in the best regards basically. And of course the ending shot is just one of the very best in cinema, and yes, this film is really just cinematic perfection. I have no flaws whatsoever with this. Of course Fumio Hayasaka does the score, and for me it's one of the best scores in cinema. I've listened to this quite a lot, and basically yes, it's got so much in this. It's epic, it's sweeping, and of course it's so beautiful and kind of transcendent. I think it just adds to the kind of the epic feel this film has, and just how kind of how emotional it is. It really is. It's so many scenes, within the film that just the way the music is used is so wonderful. Especially, of course, when the younger samurai, he has this kind of scene in the center of the film where he's kind of just he's lying back on the flowers. You know what I've seen him on about if you've seen the film, and he's just staring up at the trees. And of course, Kurosawa does that again. Where he kind of uses the light to flicker through the trees and create this wonderful effect. It's so spiritual, this moment, and that is one of the best moments of music in the film for me, and just a wonderful spiritual moment. It's just so human and really moved me to tears. Moments like this, and of course the ending act is just devastating. It really is. But again, it's triumphant. It's triumphant and kind of devastating in the same way. It's bittersweet. As I say, this does not end the most happiest of ways, and also it's not completely sad and one-sided in that sense. This is not a film that's deliberately depressing, and it's just one that is constantly compelling throughout, and it just goes beyond, for me, perfection. Yes, some people don't think this is a great film, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. But for me, it really is a masterpiece, and not only a masterpiece, it's a magnum opus, which of course is technically the same thing. But of course, my rating system, we have the 100% pluses, and of course the highest rating is a magnum opus. And of course, this film for me gets that. It gets 100% plus, tier S. This is very, very high on my favourite films list. It's definitely in my top 60, and just, wow. This film, in every sense, is mind-blowing. It really is. You can study this film and learn more about film. And of course, it's just something in itself. It's so moving. It's so beautiful. Such a human film. These characters, this whole community, this village, the way that this is explored, these themes, and just the whole kind of the joyous moments, and also the kind of more tragic moments. It's a perfect film. The balance of character, of narrative, and just action, of course, as well, and just moments of comedy, but also, of course, moments that really are deeply, deeply sad. And of course, not everyone makes it out at the end. Of course, it's a very, very unique ending in that sense as well, what it does there. I won't spoil it, but again, it's just such a bittersweet ending. And of course, I've rooted so much for these characters, every single one of the 7, and when things did happen, I was shattered by this, of course. And the first time I saw this, once I'd seen it, instantly made it into my top films list. Of course, very, very high, extremely high. Of course, it's a film that I'm obsessed with. Of course, not everyone likes every film. We can't all agree on everything, but for me, I do agree with the mostly with the sight and sound, and IMDb and stuff, when they say this is one of the very, very best films ever made. For me, Tokyo Story is very, very close to this. But of course, as well, the anime film that I was on about, the Miyazaki, is above this in my preference. But again, apart from that, really, this is literally the essential Japanese film, along with Tokyo Story, for me. If you haven't seen the film, highly recommend it, of course. It's one of the films you have to see, and just find a time where you can watch this, let it unfold, and just hopefully be transfixed and moved by this, because it's one of the most wonderful films in the history of cinema. It could be the best film in 1954, although Rear Window, very, very close, of course. And yes, this film is just something else. You can't really describe this in words. I've done my best with the review, but yes, you just have to see it. It's one of the most spiritual films. One of its greatest strengths is the simplicity of the narrative, but the characters are some of the most deepest we've seen in cinema, and just ones that I got so invested in all their arcs, and just kind of the discussions between them. That when things did happen, of course, I was truly, truly moved to tears by this film every time. This is the third viewing now, and I cannot wait to probably maybe in a year and a half or 2 years again watch this film. It's something that just has to be seen. I think it's one of the most popular films for a reason. In terms of its cinematography, its editing, its overall direction, the music, and just how to make an epic film that feels so personal. But it's got such a massive scope, despite really only having a couple of main locations. Of course, it is an adventure film. It's got that spirit, that energy, the rawness as well. but it isn't really, it doesn't have loads and loads of locations. It's not globetrotting or anything, and it's just so personal, so focused. And this is just in every single second of this film, in every frame, perfect for me personally, and just something to really behold. This is one of the greatest films ever made, no question for me. I do think it's in my top 60 for sure, and yes, it's a magnum opus for me. And as I say, I don't like to say never, but I think I really don't see any other Kurosawa's topping this. Literally, I really don't see it, and I think this. If you've not seen the film, go check it out very very soon. This film is a magnum opus. It really is just something else. It's got dreamlike qualities. There's a visceral energy to this. Toshirô Mifune, Takashi Shimura, everyone involved in this are flawless. Toshirô Mifune, I don't imagine seeing a performance that will be better than this from him. He has never been better as far as I'm concerned. From what I've seen, Takashi Shimura as well, the essential performance from him, and Daisuke Katô, wow, he's so amazing in this film. Everyone in this film, all the characters, the way it's written, the way it's shot, and the performances are flawless. And it goes beyond that. It goes to kind of a mythic, spiritual level of something that is just truly legendary, and kind of fit in that this is a legendary tale of old, and it feels like this. It really feels mythic. It feels like this grand piece. It's majestic, it's sweeping, and it's Seven Samurai. This film is a magnum opus, and if you've not seen it, again, I emphasise you have to see this film. Highly, highly recommend it, of course. One of my favourites. Cannot wait to review more Kurosawa films. And yes, thanks for watching my review.